Hey everybody, how's it going? We're going to go ahead and take apart this fan today because it's just not working properly. So we're going to use a 8mm socket on a socket wrench and a number 2 Phillips. Sorry, I kind of took a second there. And I think it's a 3mm Allen key. I don't know. I'm sorry about the lack of knowledge for the metric system. But I'm going to go ahead and start by taking out my fan's a little bit different. I've taken it apart before and I lost one of the screws. This is actually my mom's fan. And it only has 5, but usually these type of fans have 6, I believe. So I'm just taking those out now. And you want to make sure to set it somewhere to where you're not going to really lose them. I know I'm just setting it on the floor. And yes, I know some people are going to be like, why are you working on the floor? Why don't you have a bench or something? Well, honestly, I just don't at the moment, unfortunately. And I found that's usually easier and better, in my personal opinion, to work on the floor anyway with this type of thing, just because it's so dirty. But now that you get 5 screws in my case, 6 in total, if you're taking apart a new fan, you take it and you set it to the side. And I'm grabbing my Allen key here. I'm just showing it's a number 3. I'm not sure if that's millimeters or what. But you can see how bad it's spinning there. It should be spinning a lot freer. So you stick it in, give it a couple good twists until the blades fall down. Then you could just pull them right up off the top, indicating that it's loose. I'm just setting those to the side for now. But you can see how dirty this fan is. So definitely past due for, a cleaning. So I'm taking my 8mm socket now, setting it on the nuts on the back, and I am just loosening them. Which I actually would have done this differently, is that there is a switch housing for the switch up above there that you could see on the back. I probably would have taken that off first and pushed the switch through, which you'll see that in a second. But I did not do that, and it technically could have led to some problems. Because if you're taking apart a newer fan, it could have the motor fall completely through, which could possibly rip out some cables or something. So, yeah. And there you just see me pop off the knob. And I kind of looked at it. But there are 2 tabs there that you actually have to clip out, which, again, you'll see here in a second. And here I go trying the screwdriver, and I am noticing that it does not go deep enough into the holes. So I had to go run out and get a different screwdriver. I think this is a number 3 Phillips, and it works better for all the screws. So I'd recommend probably a number 3 Phillips, but a number 2 would work, except it has to be able to go into these deeper recessed holes. So you just undo these 2 screws here, and yeah, it should pop right off. This one, again, the plastic's a little kind of cheap, kind of messed up. So sometimes it doesn't really want to give. So you kind of have to pull on it like upwards on the housing while you're turning the screw. Sometimes you just have to kind of rip up with some force. But you could see the switch wires and everything in there. And I'm trying to push it through on the other side, but they're kind of tough. This one was not given. So I had to flip it over. And I was trying to even push through on like the little tabs, but my fingers just weren't strong enough. So I'm taking a screwdriver there and just kind of pressing in on the sides of the tabs, and it pops through pretty easily. And there, it's just kind of stuck in the plastic because, again, it's cheap. So I just kind of gave it a couple good taps, came right out, and the cable just slots right out of those holes. And boom, there you go. So I'm kind of wrestling with it here, trying to get the cable up and through, because I don't like having to deal with the fan housing there if I don't have to. So I always just take the cable out and set it to the side like everything else. And this part, there are 4 more nuts, I think 2 washers, and of course, the screws themselves, which are a Phillips, which I believe I use the number 3 because they're pretty good size. But yeah. And then, of course, I'm showing, the nuts. But look at that capacitor. if you could see it. That's the big thing hanging off the bottom. I'm showing it now to where it has that crack. That's not good. I actually had one of these myself, and this was the 2014 model. They have since updated it. I may do a video of me taking mine down here shortly, just because it could use a good cleaning. But it came loose and actually broke that little part off to the capacitor attached to the housing, and oh wow. I woke up one night and I heard something like beating around like the fan housing, and it turned out to be the capacitor. The fan blades got all bent and warped, and it was bad. So definitely be careful. You know, like if you start to see that, maybe think of some way to fasten it on there better. I mean, honestly, this fan's on its last leg anyway, so I'm not too worried about it, but I'll definitely be warning my mother when I give it back to her, just to keep an eye on it, and if that ever comes loose, to just go ahead and get a new fan. As for taking out these screws, just take them out like normal. I like to put the nuts back on there just to make sure that the washers stay on and everything's kind of, kept together. I think that that's very important. So I'm just taking that apart. Again, there's 4 of them. Just kind of position it however you have to take it off. It's a pretty simple process, like anything else on stuff like this. So, it just takes a bit of doing. And I also want to say I don't really recommend, people go out and do this. And if you do, you're kind of taking that risk on your own stuff. So if you damage it or break it, I'm in no way liable. Not that it's really super hard. I think pretty much anyone could figure it out. But again, just for legal reasons, I have to say, I'm not endorsing you take apart your fan. I'm not telling you to take it apart. This is just how I do it personally. And really the tools I use to do it, which I actually forgot quite a few of them. So yeah. And that is my lubricant I'm going to be using, which I use mineral oil. I just have a lot on hand because I use it for other things as well. And it does work. Now you could use like sewing machine oil, or I've even used chainsaw lubricant before. Again, I know people are probably cringing at that, like, why would you use something of that nature? Why don't you just get real lubricant? But yeah. As for this, I noticed that the bearing surfaces are pretty gross, so I wanted to go ahead and get some isopropyl alcohol, and I'm just using a gauze, just because I found that it works pretty well. So I don't open it all the way. And I'm going to go ahead and put some isopropyl alcohol in there, and realize here in a second that, I have some little tiny cuts on my hands, so that's fun. But isopropyl alcohol I found is a really nice cleaning agent for just various things, so I use it here and there. And for those worrying about, well, is it going to stay in the fan? No, it evaporates rather quickly, and you could see all the gunk I pulled out of that. What would that be? Bushing, maybe? Yeah, there I go with my hands. But yeah, there's just a lot of gunk in there, a lot of old oil, and it's just a good idea to clean that off. I wouldn't recommend going over the windings, or like the wire bits, whatever you want to call it, of the motor itself, just because I don't know if it would degrade the insulation on them or if it would be bad. So again, if you use isopropyl alcohol in any kind of motor, just be aware that you could be possibly degrading certain parts of it. And again, I'm not held liable. I'm not saying that you go out and do this. So I just kind of folded it down, sticking it in the front bushing, and I'm just trying to, clean it up for the most part. I'm not trying to make it brand new or anything, but yeah. Here I'm just kind of wiping it down because why not? I mean, I have some alcohol and stuff, and it's a nice cleaning agent, as I've said, so it's just simple enough to do it. I am being careful not to touch the wires as much and the windings, just because I don't want to take that chance of degrading the insulation and possibly killing the fan. But again, not really recommending doing that. So wiping it down, making it nice and clean, closing my alcohol because I don't want it to evaporate, which is a thing. And as for the brushing, I actually probably would have brushed it first before cleaning it, just because you're kicking up all of the dust, and you'll see how bad it is here in a second. But yeah. Also note the front. You don't ever take off the front housing on a fan like this, like the Utilitech or however you say it, because it's attached on there basically with all the wires and the capacitor, the switch, the ground, and all that fun stuff. So you can't really take the front off. I always take the back off just because it's easier, but you can clean the front as you just seen me do. And I just use a little brush. I think I got that one from the dollar store, so, cheap little thing. And I use it for a lot of different projects and various things. So it's definitely handy to have. I mean, you could technically use a toothbrush if you want. I would just use a new one, just because you probably don't want to get gunk in there. But yeah, really anything will work just about. And you see me here realizing, I just cleaned that, but I just got the dust kicked up, so it probably isn't so clean anymore. That's fun. So I had to kind of clean it again a little bit. Not a big deal, but And right now I'm not getting the wires, I'm getting the inner metal parts, just because why not? So now I'm getting the back bushing and everything in there, making sure it's kind of clean. So I stuck my finger in there, which again, people are going to be like, you just introduced grime and stuff, but I don't really care at this point. You can see how dirty that thing is, so yeah, no, it's fine. Plus it's, again, a fan from 2014, so I'm not that worried about it. It's probably about time to get a new one. But I do like keeping things alive for as long as I possibly can. Now, as for lubricating, I just kind of stick oil in there. I like to get it all over the bushing, just to make sure it has nice contact. I try not to add too much, but I also don't want to add too little. You see me swishing it around, sticking my little oil bottle over there. And it's kind of funny. And you'll notice it when I'm sticking it back in, as it kind of bounces back because now there's a fluid in there and it doesn't want to go in super easily and sit flush. So it kind of wants to pop, back in and out. So you kind of have to play with it a little bit, kind of wiggle it around. See, now I'm pressing it down. It's kind of like a spring. But yeah, you just kind of play with it for a second and it will eventually, kind of go back into position. And you can see as well, kind of rocking around. That'll come back into play here in a few when I go to reassemble everything. And you'll see what I mean by that. Is when you go to reassemble everything, you have to make sure that it's pretty dead on straight, because if not, it's going to have too much friction and it's not going to spin properly. It would be almost worse, in my opinion, than if you ran the bearings and everything dry. So you definitely want to make sure that you get everything lined up pretty well. And you can see there I went to spin it and it just did not work. So what I do is I take a screwdriver and I just kind of give it a couple good taps until it starts spinning freer. And you can see there it's pretty much good, but I'm paranoid. I don't want to get the whole thing back together and have to, keep tapping and tapping. So I keep messing with it, and that's pretty much good there. It's spinning pretty free, so I'm happy enough with that. It's good enough for me. And now I'm just sticking the screws back in. Now I'm going to give them a good tighten. Again, it's not super imperative that you do a star pattern, but I'm kind of going to. I guess technically it'd be more like a diamond than a star, but, whatever. Lost a zip tie. Looks like it was probably pretty old and, I don't know, kind of messed up from the heat cycles and everything that the fan went through. I know my mom ran this thing pretty hard, and I usually run my fans pretty hard as well. Usually run them every night when I sleep, which I know some people are going to be like, you run a big industrial fan when you sleep, but I live right next to a busy highway, so it kind of helps block out the noise, which is nice, to be sure. But right now I'm just kind of sticking the screws in, getting them finger tight. And these screws are kind of screwed up. Pun intended, I guess. I did not mean for that. But yeah, they're kind of messed up a little bit to where they have some rough spots, and you could see me kind of struggling to get the nut back on there super easily, but I eventually get it. I don't give up. So, yeah, fun. But now you're going to change your socket, if you're using one, to the tightening mode, and you're going to stick your Phillips head screwdriver into the other side. You're just kind of going to start tightening it. And again, if you're trying to do like a diamond pattern to make it as even as possible, you don't want to do it super tight. I kind of over tighten it there a little bit, but you know, I realized the error of my ways and backed it off just to where it's snug, but it's not really what I would consider to be tight. Oh wow, I just realized I stuck the socket end onto the Phillips screw. That's funny. But yeah, you just kind of stick them together and tighten them down. Pretty easy. And I mean, technically, if you want to use the wrench to tighten, you could use the wrench to tighten. If you want to do it the screwdriver way like I'm doing, you could use the screwdriver to do it. It really doesn't matter. Again, it's not important. It's not really mission critical which is doing the tightening, as long as the other side is holding it in place well enough to where it's not just spinning around infinitely and you're not actually getting anywhere with it. So preferences are preferences. Choose really whichever makes you happiest. Feels right to you, whatever you want to say. But yeah, pretty simple little project there. But again, if you're doing this, you're doing it at your own discretion. You break something, it's not my doing. And as I tighten it down, it's not spinning as freely as I would like, so I'm just going to have to kind of go in and tap it back into place until it starts spinning freer, which that's looking, yeah, pretty good. Give it a few more good luck taps. But yeah, I mean, honestly, it's not rocket science, but there are some parts that could potentially hurt you, like the capacitor, for example. If you took off those what would those be, like wire nuts? Whatever you want to call them, that kind of protect you, and then you touch that and it's been live for a bit, you could get a nasty shock from it, and definitely isn't something that I would recommend. As for this, I'm about to do a pretty big fail at sticking it back in, as I'm sticking it in backwards. At least I think. Let's see. As I should have taken the motor part and stuck it in the top, but instead, again, I'm sticking it in backwards. And you'll see why when I take apart my more modern fan, if there is a, I don't know, demand for that. And right now I just realized, like, So, here we go. Let's do it the right way. The wire goes through the top, or I guess, yeah, you know what I mean. So it goes in like that. You drop it in, you line up the power cable with those two little pieces of round stock or whatever wire you want to call it. Stick that in, then you're going to take the back plate just like that, stick it on the back, and this part could be a little tricky. So you're going to stick that in, and luckily for me, this fan is all old and it's kind of warped on the back to where it kind of holds itself in place. But yeah, you definitely want to be careful because you don't want the motor falling out the front. So I'm just setting it up like this for the video's sake, and I'm going to go ahead and take a nut, but I happened to forget that I was supposed to put a washer in there, so that was fun. So sticking the nut on, thinking, oh yeah, I'm doing great. There's one down, kind of. But unfortunately, I have to take that one back off and put the washer on and then put the nut back on and all that fun stuff. So yeah, not the easiest thing, but not the worst thing either. So there I go, sticking on the other washer and nut. And I think I showed it, maybe. Or no, I don't think I actually did. I think I do on like the third nut I put on. But I'm just sticking it on there and kind of making it a little tight just to where it holds itself in place, because again, you don't want it falling out the front, because you don't want to rip any wires out of anything. That would be very bad. And there I am just taking that nut off because I realized the error of my ways. I didn't put it together the correct way, or at least how I found it. So I'm sticking that back in there, which I think it probably isn't even supposed to go in like that. It's probably meant for somewhere else, but it's been so long since I first taken this thing apart. It's hard to say. So I'm just reversing the steps I did. But you just kind of want to stick it on there, give it a good tighten. Again, make sure it doesn't fall through, because that's literally the only thing holding it into place is that little plastic piece. So yeah, you want to make sure it's on there well. But as far as other things, I'm trying to think. I mean, I guess I could talk about lubricants a little bit. I've actually done some experiments with stuff like this to where I've actually put grease in like the bushings at one point. And again, I know people are probably cringing at that, but I was curious if it would actually allow me to go longer before I'd have to clean it. And no, actually, it kind of turned to like a gel or jelly, and it was gross. But it did run for a very long time. It's just, as you could imagine, it's not really made for this kind of an application. So yeah, there I go, putting on the 2 washers. Sorry about that. But yeah, I put on the 2 washers. Now I'm sticking the nuts on, and I'm just giving them again a nice little tighten, making sure that they fit in nice and snug, which you do want to be a little careful because you are screwing onto plastic to where you don't want to go, full on, strength on it, just because of the plain simple fact that if you do, you're probably going to crack the plastic or mess it up, which you can kind of see that I did, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. I don't even know how old at that point, maybe like 20 when I first took this fan apart, maybe 22. And it was one of those things to where I didn't know any better, and I just tightened it as tight as I could possibly go. And yeah, you could see there me kind of using the back of the wrench since it has it, and just kind of spinning that because it's easier than spinning the whole wrench. And I'm just demonstrating that because I felt kind of stupid not using that first. But here goes the switch module, which I just kind of hold the back, take the front, push it in nice and tight. And there's the click. You can see all the dust flying out of it. That's fun. So you just push it till you hear the little click. Make sure it's in good, just to where it doesn't back itself out. Take the knob. I always like to have it on 0 before I start. So I push it on there until it fits. And there you go. It's good. And now I'm going to start cleaning the actual fan housing, which again, I might want to do that first in the future, but I'm not really worried about it. I mean, honestly, any dust that falls back into the motor is what it is. I don't really care. I know some people would be like, well, I just cleaned it. I don't want excess dust. I don't want excess dust. But it's not really that big a deal. It's just the way I kind of do it. I'm sure that there are probably better ways, and I'm definitely open to it, but yeah. And here you can see me kind of aligning it, and all the wires come out the bottom hole except for the main wire that comes in from the wall outlet that goes in through the side hole. And you just kind of stick it on there, tighten down the screws, which can be a little tricky, especially since this one's all old and chewed up, which I've probably had this fan apart I don't know how many times. I mean, again, it's from like 2014. I probably serviced it once a year since then, so you could imagine. But at that point, the motor is all ready to go. Basically, it's all nice and reinstalled. Everything's on. The switch is in place. You could see the year or so's worth of dust coming off of that. Just keep in mind as well, my mother has dogs, so yeah, it tends to get a little dirty, but meh. It is what it is. But yeah, I'm just kind of going around it. Not being too picky with it. I mean, honestly, I'm not really that worried about making sure it's perfect. I just want it to be cleaner than it was, to where it doesn't really impede the airflow. And I'm just checking to make sure that it was still spinning nice and freely. sticking that out of the way because I realized I had to clean the blades themselves, which I'm using the alcohol again. Not because I want to sanitize it, but because it works so much better. Is that it allows me to get in there and really get off a lot of that dust. And that's definitely a good thing. There is something I want to add though, is when I do this, I'm always very careful because I have cut myself in the blades before, is that they're not super sharp, but they're sharp enough to where it can slightly cut you just because it's a piece of stamped, probably sheet metal of some kind. I'd imagine probably steel or aluminum or something. I don't know. So be careful. You can slightly cut yourself. But the brush probably would have worked pretty well, but, the blades themselves I like definitely cleaning as much as I can to where they stay balanced, to where it doesn't have all this dust possibly sticking to it, or areas for new dust to possibly adhere to. So that's why I'm using the old microfiber cloth and isopropyl on that and not, a lot of the other areas. Here's the top or front piece of the fan, which it's dusty. Definitely very dusty. I'd recommend probably wearing a dust mask if you were going to do this, but again, I don't really recommend you do this. You can see like the little dust ring on the carpet. Ugh, it's so gross. But things like this usually get pretty gross because they're sucking in all this air and dust, and you can imagine. And there I'm just kind of like, yeah, just go around again. I mean, why not? It's probably the last time I'll be messing with this fan for at least a good year, or if it dies before then, maybe never again. As for this, I'm lining it up because there's a flat part on the, I don't know what you'd really call that, the rotor shaft. I don't know, the output shaft of it. But yeah, you want to line that up to where it lines up with the little, I guess that would be a grub screw, wouldn't it? Like a little Allen key. Gave it a little too much of a spin there. I was like, uh-oh, how do I slow this thing down? Because I definitely didn't want to touch the blades because they would definitely, they would hurt a little bit. So now comes my least favorite part. And Utilitech, if you're watching this, which I know you're not, please figure out some kind of better solution than just screws, because they're so hard to get started. And I mean that. They're very hard to get started because it's just a hole in one side, a hole in the other side, and you have to basically get it perfect to actually get the screw to start. And again, I'm about to mess up because I tighten it down too tight, which you never want to do, just because of the plain simple fact that once you tighten it down really tight, you run into the issue then that you can't really adjust it, because again, this is very, very bad fan housing, and if you cannot adjust it and move it slightly to align with the slot, it's just not going to work that well. And I mean that. It's not going to work well at all. So be aware of that. Definitely be very aware of that. I mean, I wish that it wasn't like that, but yeah, not fun. And here it goes, because I'm going to be like, oh, I can't line this up. Here I go. And this screw is being a real pain as well. And no, I don't think it's stripped. I think it's just bad design. Because you're going through the one piece and then you're trying to go through the back, and it's bad. It's just really, really bad. And on these, I think it was $40 originally, at least this one was. The newer one was like, I think $50, like the new and improved modern model. But you see me there, I must stab myself a couple times with a screwdriver, and luckily I don't. But I would definitely be careful. And here I am switching to the number 3 Phillips, or slightly bigger. I think it's number 3. I don't know. But I'm just sticking it in there, and it's able to grab the screws better. So if you have a fatter Phillips, or a Plus, or whatever you want to call it, go ahead and use that one. Don't use the smaller ones if you can help it. So here I am again, struggling with it. which I'm trying to get the housing to line up, and it's just not good. I mean, I would really, really wish that was like some of the older fans I used to, have as a kid, to where it had like those flat clips on the slide or side that would slide in and out of the way to kind of hold everything in place, but they don't want to use it for some reason, which is kind of baffling to me. I mean, I guess they're afraid that a kid or something is going to open it up and possibly stick their hands in, which would definitely hurt you. But I don't know. Honestly, I just think that this system is just terrible. Or as the kids say, cursed. I was trying to get it in there to where the one missing screw would be at the bottom, but I just could not get it to go in this hole. Just because it's so warped and just bad. And before anyone says like, oh, well, I guess you must have bent it. No, I didn't bend it. This is just how these fans are, is that they're very warped and just kind of terrible as far as the housing construction. I'll get into the nicer model in my next video, which are quite more expensive, and they are not honestly any better, which again, I'll get to that in the next one. But as for this one, the fan is basically all back together. It's good to go, and I'm about to test it here in a second. So I guess in closing, if you guys enjoyed this, it's watching me take apart my fan and service it, give a like, comment if you want. If not, that's cool. And there I'm just testing all the modes. It works, so hey, that's good. So anyway, I guess that wraps up the video. So if you guys liked it, awesome. Have a good one.